In my particular space, and this is one of the things again that hooks in with GlobaliD, I might say I have a Willie's Maze card and it's in very good condition, but I'm going to need to go out and get that verified or get an appraisal from a recognized third party. And that's one of the fun things that we think is going to be added to this market, is that concept of vouchers from trusted third parties. So even something that was created that didn't, when it was created, didn't anticipate the fact that there would be NFTs and a cryptographic way of signing it, can get into this ecosystem after the fact. The other thing I'm really looking forward to is how are we going to trade these items and sell them in a way that's safe to both the buyer and the seller. I've watched this and was schooled by my 13-year-old, who shows how, like, in her particular game in Roblox, how they're trading one sword for 2 chickens or whatever they're doing. They have like a mini little light escrow system, but that's all within that closed, proprietary silo. Now we want to be able to do this in a DeFi world. We want to be able to do it in an interoperable cross-platform world. So we're going to need new tools so that the buyer and the seller, the two parties to the trade can do this safely.
Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of our new Rundown style podcast, where we'll go over a few of the more relevant topics of the past couple of weeks. The first big one is, I think on everyone's mind, is the hype around NFTs, the magic number being $69 million. Nice. For Beeple's art collection. Greg, what's your hot take on that?
Hi, Alec. Well, thanks for having me. I think we're at the beginning of a brave new world. It was also the week that I think Jack Dorsey sold a tweet for $2.5 million. It suggests to me that I think Donald Trump might actually be a billionaire now, not because of any business deals he's done, but I think he did quite a few tweets in his day. And those, if Jack sold his first one for 2.5 million, if you add all those up for Donald, he might be a real billionaire. And so, yes, artists are now producing art that's in a digital only form, in a non-fungible token. It is selling for real money, and I don't think there's any looking back. I think every form of asset we have, whether it's a carbon credit, which might be fungible, versus a piece of art, which is one of a kind, is non-fungible, versus something in between, like maybe a Pete Rose rookie baseball card. There might be X number issued by Topps, and it may not have a serial number on it, but there's a certain limited number, and those two are a certain form of an almost non-fungible token. But I think there's no turning back the clock. We're going to have these. They're going to be in our wallet, just like any other form of fiat, crypto, or commodity.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy concept, right? Just the ability to be able to claim ownership over something that's technically, infinitely reproducible, and for that to have value. I own a few NFTs myself. I mean, they're not on the blockchain or anything.
What kind do you own? What do you own?
Yeah, so they're these skins that are in this competitive computer game that I play, right? I mean, it's only like a few $1,000s worth. But I feel like with the whole NFT thing, there's two stories to ownership, right? Story one, right, is actually buying this stuff, having it in your wallet, and maybe the price goes up. That's nice, having something valuable. But story two, which I think is told very nicely in a computer game, because it is a digital world, right? It's just about actually enjoying these things that you own now, right? So in the game, it's like you can use your item, you can show off your item. It's kind of like owning maybe a nice watch, right? And you get to wear it, you get to show it off, stuff like that. I'm very curious to see what people come up with now for this new world of NFTs, right? That live on the blockchain, that can live with anywhere. Like, how do you integrate those things into, you know, our digital personas and environments so that you can tell the enjoyment story, right? So you can sort of like hang something on a wall or maybe wear your watch out, like um because you can do that with like Instagram, right? You know, like if you're a content creator, you create stuff, it goes viral, people know it's yours, they know where to go find it, you can show it off, right? And that's sort of like the next story here, I think, besides just having stuff in your wallet and it's valuable. So I'm curious to see where that goes.
Well, I'm curious too, but the interesting thing that people like, there's certain items that have become collectible, not because the item was so unique, but
Right.
because the trail of provenance, who owned it before, was
Mm,
interesting. And so even relatively uninteresting items can be interesting because you bought it from someone or
right.
some organization that was interesting. It has an interesting lineage. And so that is a whole new realm of value, is keeping track of the trail of provenance.
What about you, Greg? Have you dabbled in the space? Have you bought anything?
Well, I just as a kid, I was a big collector, so I do have a box of Carl Yastrzemski, Pete Rose, Willie Mays rookie cards. I also have
Oh,
some of the original Batman cards. So I have these things which I just ended up when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. I just thought they were cool and might be collectibles. So unfortunately, they're in some storage container somewhere, but I look forward to getting them and figuring out how to get them tokenized up and on the blockchain and sellable. In my particular space, and this is one of the things again that hooks in with Global ID, I might say I have a Willie's Maze card and it's in very good condition, but I'm going to need to go out and get that verified or get an appraisal from a recognized third party. And that's one of the
yeah.
fun things that we think is going to be added to this market, is that concept of vouchers from trusted third parties. So even something that was created that didn't, when it was created, didn't anticipate the fact that there would be NFTs and a cryptographic way of signing it, can get into this ecosystem after the fact. The other thing I'm really looking forward to is how are we going to trade these items and
Right.
sell them in a way that's safe to both the buyer and the seller. I've watched this and was schooled by my 13-year-old, who shows how, like, in her particular game in Roblox, how they're trading one sword for two chickens or whatever they're doing. They have like a mini little light escrow system, but that's all within that closed, you know, proprietary silo. Now we want to
Right.
be able to do this in a DeFi world. We want to be able to do it in an interoperable cross-platform world. So we're going to need new tools so that the buyer and the seller, the two parties to the trade can do this um, safely,
Yeah.
and with any form of value, one item for another or one item for money. It's the old from Popeye, they used to have, what was his name, Wimpy. It says, I'll give you 2 hamburgers tomorrow for a hamburger today, kind of thing. So all that's coming. It's a great opportunity for smart contracts. We believe that, if Ether's too slow for low value transactions, it's a great opportunity for some of the new chains to support these new NFTs.
Including Solana, right? And if you haven't, check out our
Solana, who we did
podcast.
an interview
Yeah.
with Anatoly a little while ago, but Polkadot, some of the others, there's a bunch of specialty chains coming up, and look, there's too much here for Ether is currently constituted to be, a really viable backbone for this. Even though Ether made conceptually with its smart contracts a lot of these tokens possible in the first place, it may not be the scaling solution for doing this at scale.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, like a lot of this has been operating already in these sort of closed systems and various games or whatever. So yeah, it will be cool to see how that, you know, blossoms in a really open environment. Okay, so we've been talking about the future a little bit. Let's rewind back to the present, right? We've got some big problems with big tech, and the news this week is that we have people like Lina Khan and Tim Wu joining the administration, as joining the FTC, and I think Tim Wu was the national economic something. I gotta check up on that. But yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
new sheriffs coming to town.
yeah. Um, so I've always been generally skeptical of regulation. I mean, I worked on Wall Street for a little bit, right around 2008. I saw Dodd-Frank happen. I mean, more recently we've had stuff like GDPR. So I'm always skeptical of just unintended consequences, and a lot of times the new rules have good intentions, but they end up hurting the small guys. Anyway, are you feeling more hopeful this time around?
I am more hopeful. I think both Tim and Lina, they're big brains, big energy, big ambition, and big insight. I mean, they get that antitrust 100 years ago, or even more than 100 years ago, might have been about price levels and this concept of like defining what the addressable market is, and that might have worked for Standard Oil, um, but it may not work for the issues we're having today with Amazon, with Apple, with Facebook. And so antitrust issues today may have more to do with issues of competition and innovation, and really just consumer choice. And the the law is not static. It does have
No.
to evolve and change. And these are folks that are coming in and are looking at more than price levels. You see, it's easy for somebody like an Amazon to say, hey, look, we bring low prices. What problem is there if we're lowering prices? Well, yeah, price levels are one issue. Uh, Monopolies have tended to come in, and once they crush the competition, they tend to raise prices. We've seen that Amazon has done that with some of the segments they're in. But that's a very narrow technical interpretation. If you have overall issues of like, well, who's going to have access to goods and services? What's the level of innovation in the market? And that becomes part of antitrust policy. And you have people like Tim and Lina that understand those issues. It is a totally new ball game. So yeah, it could get screwed up. You could have bad regulations or bad rules. But look, football is good because it has rules. You wouldn't have like
No.
a better football game if you simply said, "Hey, you can bring baseball bats and you can do whatever you want on the field," and there's like no boundaries, there's no time limit. It's just like a slaughter fest. Like you want to have good rules to have good competition. And I think it is time to like update what's been 100-year-old way of thinking about antitrust. And I can't think of anybody better than Tim and Lina to kind of shake things up.
Yeah, I think at the very least it seems hugely positive to have um people in leadership positions who really understand technology, who understand the space. I mean, even someone like Gary Gensler, at the
Yes.
SEC, like he gets blockchain, right? He's been teaching about this stuff. We don't know what he's going to do yet, but I like that he gets it, right?
Yeah, I encourage people to watch some of his classes that he taught at MIT, and he's a from basics up kind of
Yeah,
person. So when you have folks like that in the administration, it's very refreshing. Or even in the Trump administration, Brian Brooks, who came from Coinbase and was head of
yeah,
legal there, and took the stand-up position at the OCC. It gave hope that
right.
wow, somebody who's actually the senior bank regulator for national banks in the country who actually understands crypto and can answer a question like, well, isn't crypto just for money laundering? And he can just stand up and say, like, hey,
Yeah,
99% of money laundering happens in banks. And if you're really going to launder money and you're going to use an indelible blockchain, you got to be like the dumbest money launderer in the world. Like that's not something you'd normally hear from the head of a regulatory agency. That was a very savvy, you know, factual, fact-based answer as opposed to a platitude.
yeah, yeah. No, it's great to see. I mean, even here in New York, I think Andrew Yang is he's leading
Right.
the polling for mayor. And another guy who gets technology. He's talked about self-sovereign identity. and you know, whether or not you agree with his policies, he's got a very fresh take, you know, compared to to anyone else who's really around. I think what's also pretty cool on the regulation front is you know, we're starting to see the states take you know, a stronger role, right? You know, even like Arizona somewhere, or Wyoming with blockchain. Arizona, they're taking on Apple and the App Store. I think they're saying they passed a bill narrowly where developers in Arizona no longer have to pay the 30% Apple tax.
Right.
They can
Right.
choose their own payment systems. So it like I the spirit of change, you know, I think is in the air, right? And people are taking action. So
There is. I mean, the concern we always have with when you have all your regulation at the state level, if you do that, and you know, and you do see innovation in state regulation, it does tend to mean that small companies can't compete because it's very
mm,
hard for a small company even to deal with a set of complex national regulations. But if you have a product and you're trying to deal with and write software code to comply and work in one way in one state and another in another, one of the things was Amazon used to always fight the concept that states would actually have taxation on things you purchased on the internet, because they, one of their main advantages is they didn't have to pay the tax that you had to pay that if you went to Walmart or Costco. And they fought and fought and fought, and they did all these things to not have a physical presence in certain states so they could avoid the state regulation. And then they had this dawning moment that, my gosh, you know, if everybody has to pay these taxes, which are super complicated, we're really good at taking super complicated things and doing it. Almost all of our competitors will struggle. Let's just be for regulation by the states and having differential tax rates and differential conditions state by state, because if anybody can figure that out, it's us. And so
right.
keeping all that complexity onto the industry becomes a source of competitive advantage for us against innovators, because they'll get bogged down and we have the resources. And so that's a little bit of the sad part. The states think they're being innovative, but their innovation could actually be thwarting innovation of smaller new entrants in the market because they don't have the resources to deal with the unintended consequence of additional complexity of each state coming up with their own set of rules.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, it's good to see them taking the lead, right? But ultimately, ideally, we have sort of national guidelines, especially for something, you know, like crypto, etc. Um, Speaking of, oh, not yet. First, uh, the death of the cookie. So, you know, this story sort of goes two ways. Obviously, you know, the headline is very satisfying for a lot of end users, right? You know, we don't like cookies, we don't like being tracked. Um, but it's sort of this double-edged sword sort of story. I'll let you go first on this one.
Well, I mean, look, the humble cookie had ostensibly a, you know, a good purpose. Like I can remember you came back, and so you don't have to do this and this and this. But like the cookie became the cookie monster. You know, it would capture enough information. It would then combine with other information, essentially identify you, track you, collect all this information, and then use it for things that are far, far away, different from the initial use case that you thought you were signing into when you accepted cookies. And so, you know, what it really is potentially the death of the cookie monster. Of course, that, you know, it kind of kills the cookie along the way. And so, um, you know, I do not view it as a societal loss to have like the loss of the cookie monster. Yes, I know Mark Zuckerberg will be unhappy that he has like poor information with which to target his ads, but I'm not someone that's going to bemoan the fact that like ads have a harder time having an economically viable strategy. I think we can live in a world now where people could, you know, basically pay to play. You know, they're willing to pay for their content. They don't need to like have the sugary sweet lure of free content because you get stuck looking at a bunch of ads. And um, that's me. That's my personal prerogative. I would love if there was this one place where I could like pay, goodbye all cookies, goodbye all ads. All you have to do is pay.
Yeah.
But it's not really a fair system because that just means like the rich get privacy and get like peace, and everybody else has to live in cookie ad land. And so I'm glad to see the sunset of cookies. I will not be going to the memorial service.
Yeah. Yeah, I think most people will be with you on that. You know, maybe the challenge though, it's sort of like what you were saying in the beginning, right? The cookie started with good intentions and it morphed into this other thing. And maybe the worry now is, okay, we're getting rid of the cookie, but you know, what are we going to get in its place, right? You know, Google, I think, has gotten the attention of the Texas AG, and a
Mhm.
bunch of other states, you know, that the UK are looking at them, because, you know, they're getting rid of the cookie, but now they're sort of replacing it with this, you know, potentially like closed garden around Chrome, around their browser. And so, you know, maybe we end up with something even worse, right? And so uh, it makes me think of sort of like American military interventions in the Middle East. It's like, you know, you can liberate a country, but then you have this vacuum that gets filled.
Right.
Obviously, you know, there are potentially good outcomes, but you know, the work is sort of making the right solutions happen, I guess. So we'll see.
Well,
I'm skeptical.
I mean, even for GlobaliD, we want to be able to let somebody have a persistent session on a browser,
Yeah.
but that's all we want to do. We want the session to be persistent. We're not trying to figure out who you are. We're not trying to observe your actions and then turn that into information that could be sold or used for ad targeting. But there are legitimate cases where you want to be able to maintain persistence of a session.
Yeah.
And a cookie was a way to kind of do that, but there's other ways that don't come with all the baggage of cookies.
Yeah. So what's sort of like who decides the parameters around those things? It will, you know, will it be the W3C? Is it about standardization around some sort of framework?
You
Or
know, that I do not know. Like that's
yeah.
over my pay grade as to like if you don't have cookies, like what are some of the other alternatives that are more transparent and hopefully more benign than cookies that became cookie monsters.
Yeah. All right. So, you know, the ongoing story, right, that I think everyone is fascinated about, and also that you've always got a great take on, is the SEC versus Ripple situation. Um,
Yeah.
I I don't have too much to say about it. I guess what I would just add is that, you know, the more I watch it develop, the more I learn about it. You know, the more the SEC comes out looking not so great. Um, and I will add that, you know, Ripple seems to have their legal fight, you know, pretty polished. Um, the one interesting thing that I saw was that they're adding, you know, this guy named John Deaton, a lawyer. You know, he's trying to get 6,000 XRP holders added to the case. I'm not a legal expert, but you know, it is sort of an awkward look for the SEC when you have 6,000 of the people that they're supposed to protect coming and complaining about, you know, the work that they're doing. So
Well, I saw in the lawsuit that the defense of the SEC against the XRP holders that are litigating over the damage that they're doing is the SEC's defense is that like, hey, it's not clear that Ripple's a security. So like, why are you suing us? And yet at the same time, they're suing Ripple saying you should have known 7 years ago that it's a security. And so, okay, only one of those statements can be true in a world of physics that I understand. But, or maybe one of those arguments you can make on Tuesdays as long as you can make the other argument on Thursdays. And so it will be interesting to see how it comes out. But look, I'm not here to rag on the SEC. I want the SEC to be a strong SEC, but I want it to do rulemaking, not like a lottery
right.
of enforcement on, an action that you file on the last day of your administration, then you and the whole crew behind it bugger off and you hand it off to like some other crew. That's just, that's like a lottery approach to like regulation. And look, that's not going to help with what the mission is. If you believe the mission is to
Right.
protect investors, raise capital, promote efficiency, liquidity, transparency in the market, none of those things are happening from the way that the SEC behaved in 2020. But look, 2021 is a new year. They might simply say, hey, look, oops. What we really need is transparency. We need these rules. Like, all they need to do is do their job, rulemaking. We're not here to question their authority. We want them to have authority. We want good rules. We want regulation, and this process may result in that. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I will say I do have empathy for the SEC. Sort of goes back to what we were talking about with Lina, Khan, and Tim Wu. Right? Making smart rules, especially at the national level, is very hard. And this is a completely new industry. It's a completely new thing. That's a huge challenge. So I get it, and I sort of understand why they would maybe rather take this approach than to actually figure it out. Because maybe they haven't figured it out, right? As you said, in their own sort of lawsuit response. So, yeah, we'll see. I still believe this is really, this is going to be a huge opportunity for the industry, because whatever happens, we'll get some clarity from it, I would hope. But,
Will do.
yeah. Okay. So the last one on the list, and I only picked this one for two reasons. One is because I saw that Stripe is valued at $95 billion now, and I look at that and I'm like, like, because that's a sort of investment that has Greg Kidd's name all over it. So a little surprising that it's not in your portfolio. And then two, in one of my chats, people were talking about a bid that Stripe had made back in the day for Ripple. This was very early on. The number being floated around was 300 million. I don't know if that's accurate, but yeah. So just wanted to bring this one up.
Yeah, I just didn't get a chance to get in on Stripe. Like, I missed that party, and by the time I mean, I saw the code, but they'd already done their raise coming out of Y Combinator. They had it from the start, and so like I go to a lot of the right parties, but I just was late to that party, and I just couldn't get in. And so it wasn't that I didn't like the idea, and all you had to do was look at a snippet of their code, write out. And if you've been in the industry, you're like, gosh, could it be that easy that I just drop this in and I don't have to think about like card processing anymore? And it's a poster child for like just picking a really thorny, obvious problem and solving it elegantly with a technical solution. So hats off to them on that valuation. And I'll be quite honest, I had always wanted Square to be more of a Stripe-like organization, more API based, but Square's always been kind of like Apple, very focused on their UI UX, and Stripe leaves the UI UX to really others. They just get tucked into other people's offerings. And so, I mean, Square's done just fine, but my gosh, just imagine what it would have been like if you could have done Square and Stripe together in one company. But anyways, I think the world can live with two companies that start with a name of S that have, $100 billion plus valuation. I do think that there was a talk. There's always talk was cheap back in the Ripple days for buying Ripple at some point. I will say I was around when the Collinson brothers, I don't know if it's Collinson brothers or Stripe, they did put up the original $3 million, not for Ripple, but for Stellar. When Stellar got started, Jed McCaleb and Stellar, they sold 2% of the float, I believe. Now, people can contest, maybe I have the wrong numbers. I think I have the right numbers. I think they sold 2% of the company for $3 million, which was quite a deal at the time. And that, that got Stellar started, and it got the Collinson brothers and Stripe knowing something about crypto. And I don't think it turned into some big integration or close type thing, but it does foreshadow the day that the Collinson brothers were thinking about crypto all the way back then at the start of Stellar. And so there's a whole bunch of those coulda, woulda, shoulda stories, and there will be a whole bunch more coming up. But it is an incredible journey that Stripe and the Collinson brothers are on. And and it's great that they didn't go public. So it's a lot less fun once you go public. It is more fun being private. I know a lot of people put that down as exit strategy or a goalpost, but enjoy the time when you're not a public company. That is my that's my one piece of advice to you. It's a lot less glamorous being public when you have to do all that reporting and answer all those quarterly earning whatevers than it is when you're private and you can take risk and you only have to answer to a very smaller community.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, you look at a company like Stripe and the $100 billion number, right? It's not very surprising. It seems very reasonable. Um, and speaking of going public, right? The last company that went public at that valuation was Facebook. I think for me that's sort of the story here, which is, you look at the companies today that are at $100 billion, right? It's the Stripes, it's the Coinbases. Um, now it's about money and real things that like really matter. And it's not that Facebook didn't matter, but it was born on sharing photos and sharing likes, right? We've sort of gone from fun tech to fintech. And I think for me that sort of speaks to where GlobaliD exists in this era, right? Things in the space just matter more. The stakes are higher. So, you need the identity to have a bit more weight. You want to have the messaging and the content too. And then, you also need the wallet and the money. So it's, yeah, that's sort of my Stripe takeaway, but, I don't know. That's pretty much it for today. I don't know, Greg, do you have anything to add?
Nope. Let's do a wrap for today. I think there'll be more excitement in the weeks to come. It is 2021 has been a rocket start. So
Yeah,
thanks for
I'm
your
sure
time
they'll.
today, Alec.
Thank you, Greg. We'll see you guys on the next one.
Take care. Bye-bye.